We'll open with any public testimony that might be.
Chair, there is no public testimony.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes of our January 21st, 2016 meeting. We'll receive any amendments to the minutes at this time. Otherwise, the chair will look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. It's been moved in second to approve our June 21st, 2016 Finance and Infrastructure Committee meeting minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We now have a presentation under discussion items, starting with a presentation on our heat abatement program, including the progress that has been made since the committee's last meeting. Welcome, Dan Carlson.
Chair, Vice Chair, thanks for this, and committee members, thanks for this opportunity to brief you on the latest developments on a heat abatement. It may seem like it hasn't been a busy month, but it's been a very busy month, just in, if nothing else, interactions with different communities, industry, as well as internally to come up with a game plan. Last board meeting was right around the time we had just released the op-ed that was written by myself, that was in the Star Advertiser. That obviously created quite a bit of an exchange, and I'd like to start just by trying to explain some of the things that, again, wasn't the media that was covered. Different things like prevailing wage. That was kind of one of the big, because as we opened the bids, really saw the disparity really primarily in the labor rates. And it came out that there is a clause in all of our contracts that we have to pay as a minimum the prevailing wage, or our contractors do, to the workers. Prevailing wage equates to a minimum wage. So again, legally we had to obviously pay the prevailing wage as a minimum wage, but it does not mean that the contractors cannot then inflate the difference there, which is in reality what was taking place, since the equipment costs were relatively what we were expecting. We've spent a lot of time obviously in dialogue back and forth with different contractors to kind of get to the bottom of that. The design of the systems and some of the specs were obviously in question. There was facts out there that some of our specs were 600 pages long. That isn't true. That is true. A lot of those, like over 500 pages of maybe a 600-page spec, might very well be federally mandated, required wording in some of those specs. The contractors are used to dealing with that. That is not something that is that unusual. If a smaller contractor who maybe is not real familiar with dealing with the DOE or a state agency, they may find that surprising. But again, the majority of the contractors, and it's pretty standard. It's our standard that we've been using all along. June was an extremely busy month, as we briefed last month. We alone had $180 million worth of projects out for bid, in addition to the heat abatement projects that we had. So again, that was an indicator, and the contractors agree that was a driving factor in the high bids. There was an op-ed piece that was written by the General Contractors Association, and I'd like to read the majority of this to you. We are in complete agreement with what they came out with, and they came out in public and was published in the Star Advertiser. And to just reiterate a few of these points, if I could. Quotes from elected officials in a recent Star Advertiser editorial have expressed surprise and even anger at the prices of the bids received by the State Department of Education to undertake heat abatement work at schools across the state. Many of the statements made in the articles and comments refer to contractors overcharging for air conditioning installations, perhaps in the mistaken belief that the work primarily involves simply retrofitting schools with cooling appliances. In fact, the bids reflect the requirements of two bills enacted by session, so Act 47 and Act 176. These measures call for much more than just adding air conditioning to schools. They also require modifications to schools, to school facilities to accommodate a range of energy efficiency measures and the use of renewable energy to move public schools towards net zero energy use. Because the majority of Hawaii schools are more than 50 years old and their construction and electrical systems reflect a different time, retrofitting them with modern features and systems which they weren't designed to support often require electrical and construction upgrades. Older school buildings also were not designed to be airtight and relied on natural ventilation for cooling. Because of climate change, trade winds are decreasing in average ocean temperatures, and the air temperatures are higher, making air conditioning and other heat abatement measures necessary to ensure school environments suitable for teaching and learning. And when it comes to ensuring new air conditioning systems function effectively, the building envelope needs to be sealed, which requires replacing windows and doors and installing insulation. I will say that's not always the case. We are leaving, and we intentionally are leaving the option of not sealing up rooms so that when the temperatures are at an acceptable rate, the windows can be open and we can promote what was the norm before. So again, that's one statement that we don't necessarily completely agree with. Add to this the requirements that renewable energy systems must also be installed to reduce the electricity costs at our schools, and it's clear the scope of work involved in addressing the requirements of the recently passed legislation goes far beyond the purchase and installation of air conditioning units. For instance, the plans for some projects necessitated more than 350 pages of specifications and drawings, which it did, which in a typical school could include the installation of a hybrid AC system, electrical upgrades, PV systems, and inverters, battery backup for PV systems, along with HVAC, insulation, roofing, ceiling fans, painting, window replacement, structural reinforcement, sunshades, and awnings. And a lot of that is true. I mean, in some of these facilities, in order to add air conditioning, we had to go in and, before we, for example, put PV panels on a roof, we want to make sure the roof is going to last for the length of the PV panels. Again, the article kind of goes on and talks a lot about just a lot of the other different things, but again, from the GCA, they quote, "The DOE wisely pre-qualified the general contractors who could bid on this work to ensure the companies supervising projects at our schools had satisfactory safety records and experience working in occupied buildings, such as schools where students and staff activities are taking place. It is important to appreciate that the DOE, while doing its best to expedite these projects, was not rushing to install air conditioning units before the next school year, but is undertaking long-term improvements that will not only provide more comfortable classrooms for students and teachers, but also curtail the cost of electricity over the long term, significantly reduce the DOE's carbon footprint, and move Hawaii closer to its goal of 100% renewable energy by the year 2045. These goals are worthwhile and visionary, but cannot be achieved without the significant investment the legislature has required the DOE to make. Hawaii's general contractors are proud to be a part of this effort, but must follow the bid specifications set forth by the DOE in submitting responsible bids that ensure all work is done to high standards. The members of the General Contracting Association of Hawaii are committed to uphold. So again, that was published by the GCA as an op-ed, and I took the time to read that just to say we're in complete agreement with the General Contractors Association. So where do we go? And again, there's a lot of outliers out there. I get calls almost every day from different folks with different ideas on how to best solve this problem. We all obviously are in a procurement cycle, so there's certain people that I have to send them to, but there's plenty of great ideas out there that we're still listening to and incorporating in our packages. So what are the next steps? We did refuse the bids. I have since restricted the bids from going out, so we could find a window. On July 28th, we have invited all the pre-qualified contractors in for if you would call a pre-bid type meeting where we can sit down and we can explain to them in layman's terms, and again, answer any kind of questions, show the pictures of what these systems look like, just to try and clarify everything. But I started to say we've restricted placing bids out there because we needed a window of time where there were no bids open, so that it didn't look like there was any unfair, we weren't giving advantages to anyone or whatnot. So hence, we have that period right around July 28th for a few days, and we've invited them. We've already sent out the invite to the 38 contractors that we have that are pre-qualified. And again, we'll brief them, we'll explain to them everything we're looking for, and we'll have our consultants there as well to answer any kind of questions that they may have, just to make sure that we clarify the error with all of them. Then bids will be released that Monday after that meeting. That's scheduled on a Friday. Some of the other techniques that we're using is we are combining a lot of the bids, as I talked about earlier, and our team is still working on that as far as just putting those bid specification packages together to make these projects more attractive. And I'll take Eva Beach Elementary is probably a great example. In that first initial package, that's the one that had one portable that we were trying to install PVAC in. That came across, again, that was the one that was really primarily highlighted. We also have a project that was going to be phased later that had the remaining 30 classrooms for Eva Beach Elementary in it. So we're combining those so that, again, it's not a one-off. a contractor can mobilize, get out there, do all the projects at once, and hopefully through the economy of scale, drive prices down. And again, as the GCA pointed out, we do and we have to, again, according to the law, do this without increasing our electrical usage. So again, those efficiency type things are all included in these. So it's really easy at times to break this down and just go how much per classroom, but again, school to school is going to vary, and we acknowledge that, but we certainly feel like we did the right thing as far as stalling it. We're going to clarify, clear the air, and again, reopen the bids. And I will say some of the bids that we have opened, because there had been a continuation of bids coming in the month of July, have definitely started to see a drastic reduction. So again, we're very hopeful that we'll be able to get to an acceptable area. So with that, I think I will, I should maybe say a few things about, there were some projects that have been awarded. For example, Campbell High School has been, Building O has been awarded. That's kind of our test case, if you will, for a lot of the, some of the heat abatement measures, i.e. not just air conditioning, but doing the series of things to all the different classrooms. But for example, those projects are being and have been awarded in this last month. So we're not at a complete standstill. Those projects were well on their way before, but the primary ones that we were focusing on, 1,000, are the ones that we're on standby now. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, thank you. I just have a couple questions. On the pre-bid meeting, what's next if attendance is low? What is this meeting going to accomplish?
We've already heard back. The contractors are very interested in doing
So
this.
they're all going to come. So they're going to release it on Monday. When do you expect the bids to come back?
We're also opening that up and giving contractors a little more time to actually create their bids. The initial bids that we put out, we had about a 2-week window. That's the minimum we can give. It's basically a 10 business day kind of window. We feel, and the feedback we were getting from the contractors was that was not enough time to put some meat into the bid. So while it may look like a delay, that actually I think will benefit us to actually have allow the contractors a little more time to actually create those bids.
So what are we saying, 3 weeks now?
I want to say 3 to 4 weeks. I think depending on the size.
At the end of August.
Right.
Basically.
Yes, sir.
So what's next if the bids come into, I know you said you had indication that it's coming down, but what is the threshold before you say, well, you know, the bids are still too high, I'm not going to do anything, versus the bids are okay, we can do 1,000 classrooms, but maybe we can do 500. What's the threshold there?
I think probably the best way to answer that is in any one of our bids that we put out, we do have an estimator that gives us an estimate as to what, it's not known to anyone other than the DOE. It's an internal figure for us to know. So as we open those bids, we can actually compare it to that and make sure that it's, we have been in dialogue with our estimator, and they've actually started to reduce their estimations. So we'll get to a point where, again, if it's within what the estimator is saying should be applicable or should be awarded, then we would go through with those bids.
One more question, Dan, on the estimate. So when the person estimates, there's a number he's looking at. Is it 100 million or whatever the number is? So if that number exceeds that, then what happens? I guess my question is, are we looking at, like I said, a threshold? What number is going to say yay or nay on this?
And again, I think it depends. It depends on which packages or whatnot. Again, if you want to just go to the basic, cost per classroom kind of thing, again, I think we anticipated up to 50 to 60,000 a classroom. And what that allows us to do, if you just do the simple math, and again, I dislike doing this by classroom because each project is so unique and so different. But let's just use that. Let's say we do go up to 60,000 a classroom, which seems ridiculous, but with everything else we got to do, that gives us another 40 million, because 1,000 times 60 is 60 million, and that gives us the room to actually do the efficiency things that we're required to by law, as well as, again, hopefully get to more schools and more classrooms.
Any other questions? Bruce?
Thanks, Dan. I think that the frustration of the public, and they understand the need, and commend you for your fiscal responsibility, but they're going to want to know, like, when is the work going to start? So assuming optimistically, as Ken said, that you get some bids for some of the projects that were within the estimator's range, when do you anticipate giving the notice to proceed to actually start the work? And then, again, recognizing that all classrooms are somewhat differently, when would at least some of those classrooms actually have air conditioning?
Again, that's kind of a hard one to answer, but let's just, if we do the basic, we have this meeting on the 28th of July, bids go out at the beginning of August, bids come back, let's say, some will come back into, again, the simpler projects will, but we should be able to start awarding definitely by the end of August, and again, by the time they mobilize, they should be and are anticipating and getting ready for it. So again, I would say August, September timeframe, again, initiating the work, the initial work, but we still have to phase it. Again, we're not going to hit the market with all the projects at the same time. We are going to accelerate them as much as we can, but and the good thing is our consultants have had a chance to actually refine those, and they're continuing to work on their design packages for their specs for the bids. So again, we'll be ready to go out. It's just a matter of measuring that and knowing what the right amount is with flooding the market. And some of the feedback we get from this meeting with the contractors, again, is going to give us just that, is what is your capacity? What can you guys bring to the table?
So for those projects that you are going to hopefully be able to award, and let's say the notice to proceed is in, just to be safe, September, on a typical classroom, say out of Neva, how quickly will some of those classrooms actually have air conditioning?
I would say that can be done fairly quickly. Again, if they have the supply in the state and they're ready to go, which they should be. We're going to give you a brief here in a little while on the Kahe brief. Part of that is a project that we have going on at Honawai, Honawai, and it'll be done by the time school starts. So again, it's one of those things that we can make happen fairly quickly once we get through all the steps to get to award.
Lance?
Thanks, Chair. I commend you again for the work that you've done and using some prudent judgment on holding off before going full board on the bids. Now we get to the issue of contingency plans because school's starting pretty soon. So I'll apologize if you already explained that because I came late. But it would be good for me to understand what kind of contingencies do you have in mind, knowing that the plan is going to be delayed, knowing that school's starting in a few weeks. How do we address the students' needs at this point?
And so that's what I would say we've taken a more holistic approach this year. So we did send out some guidelines to the principals on things, methods that they can use to how you don't send the kids out for recess if it's a certain time of day and it's heat indexes and whatnot. We've had a lot of dialogue, and in those guidelines we've also just talked about using air-conditioned space. So obviously most libraries have air conditioning, and utilizing those for the kids and for the faculty. Again, we're not at the point where we're doing heat days or early releases. That was a no-go for this year. Again, I would say it's more of an education campaign, as well as we've made significant strides in the painting of reflective coatings on roofs and whatnot to try and help out the heat abatement, and particularly in the portables. So we've done some of those. We did distribute out the portable AC units, and we have those distributed. Again, we will continue to work with communities as they come forward as well. And that's a pretty active program right now as well, with communities coming to the table with donated AC and with, again, working through a licensed electrician for the installation independently. So you're right.
And I saw the news last night about the numbers of projects that you've embarked on to cool a number of the classrooms. But knowing that, are there certain communities you worry about that will not be prepared to handle the heat coming forward?
I would say I think last year was a great wake-up call. Now I will tell you, if you look at this week, it's starting to get hotter, obviously. And The issue with this week is it has more to do with the tropical storms and then moving across to the north of us and stalling out the trade winds. If we get into that cycle again, which is what we were in last year, I think we're going to continue to obviously see those uncomfortable temperatures. What was encouraging to us was, and I can show them to anybody, but we've been tracking at all our different weather stations temperatures, and this year, at least so far, up to about this week, the temperatures were significantly cooler than they were last year leading up to this. You talk to NOAA and whatnot, they're talking about a La Nina instead of El Nino. Getting ready to take over, but no one's committing to exactly when that might be. But again, I think this week is an indicator as far as, again, with the tropical storm developments, that it could be very similar to last year.
So in your opinion, you think the schools are much more prepared to handle the issue than last year?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? If not, we'll move on. Before we move on to the next update, I neglected when we opened the meeting to thank Principal Sanders for allowing us to utilize your beautiful facility. Thank you very much for having us here today. Our next agenda item is an update on CAHE, which Dan had referenced previously. It's the DOE's Sustainable Energy and Energy Efficiency Master Plan.
Thanks, sir. We're going to do something a little different here, just to start off this CAHE update. I'm going to ask Perry to come up here. Perry is a recent graduate of IAEA High School, and part of his graduation project, he learned about some of our sustainability efforts and what we're doing on that front, and he decided to do his project on sustainability, and particularly LED lights. So I've just asked him to kind of come and give a short presentation as to exactly what he provided for his senior project.
First of all, Chairman, Vice Chairman, members of the board, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to just share my little STEM project with you all. Hope I can shed some light. But with that being said, I will begin. So I've always been interested in public policy, I've always been interested in history, I've always been interested in English, but I recently realized that the science and technology of the era in which history occurs will often define that history. So I looked at what's currently going on with our technology, and to be specific, our energy policy. So in Hawaii, I know we're always big into a renewable energy, and I read about a bill that Governor Ige passed in 2015, House Bill 623. The bill aims to essentially create a sustainable Hawaii by the year 2045. So I read about the bill, and I realized that by the year 2045, I'm going to be a little old. So just a little bit. So I wanted to think about, for my STEM project, what I might be able to do in the meantime. So I went up to my principal. I went up to my principal and I said, hey, can you put me in contact with someone who might be able to tell me about energy efficiency, about how energy works at our schools? Because especially this last year in my senior year, we've had a lot of issues with air conditioning and the way we generate energy. So I sat down with Mr. Sakuma Elliott. She got me into contact with him. He's a former electrical engineer with HECO, and now he works with the Department of Education. So I sat down with him and I inspected the school infrastructure. I learned about how energy works at our school. And then I also, since I had been so focused on solar energy, thought maybe my STEM project could focus on solar energy. Maybe we could install more panels. But I found out that the pilot project that was behind the installation of these solar panels was ending. So for a while I didn't know what to do with my STEM project, so I had to look into what I could do next. So I reevaluated the issues facing IAEA High School, and for that matter, the issues facing a lot of other schools. I looked at fading lights, the fact that those lights use a lot of energy, and that at night, when those lights are on especially, they're meant to provide campus security. So I wondered, how can we improve on those three factors? So I kind of moved away from the solar energy thing just because it wasn't feasible, but I still wanted to create a plan that could maybe help my school and other schools. So Mr. Sakuma Elliott showed me this little graph up here. It's a screenshot from an actual Google Doc that he sent me, and I was looking over the numbers and I noticed something about LED lights. When you look at the cost of HID lights, high intensity discharge light bulbs, they will cost, or in this case, 4 lights per year will cost around $1,056 for that electricity. But when you look at LED lights, light emitting diode lights, you see that they cost around $495 a year for those 4 same lights. This, of course, was an isolated project at McKinley High School. So I wondered, if this project saved that much money, is there something we could do at IAEA High School? So I looked at sites at IAEA High School and I started to look at where we could maybe use LED lights. So before I did that, I had to formally draft out my plan with my STEM advisors. So my plan wanted to look at how we can install LED lights because we wanted to create more efficiency at our school, especially when it comes to requiring less maintenance, less electricity, and heightened security. But why LED? So LED was introduced, well, it wasn't really introduced, but it kind of came to light in 2010. Sorry, I used too many puns. It came to light in 2010 in the aftermath of the American economic recession. The United States Department of Energy, through what's called the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Program, looked at LED lights. And they realized that because it's a natural solid-state lighting system, it actually doesn't require as much electricity. The way you can tell that is because this is how I describe it. If it's not a natural state solid lighting system, if you touch it, it will burn you. And I've learned that personally many times. So an LED light really won't burn you. And think about that energy, that heat that is emitted from the light. You don't see that in an LED light. So just this one graph from the Department of Energy shows the projected savings if we moved in a direction that was more favorable to LED lights. So, of course, this being a plan, I needed to look at where these lights could go. And I looked at an area that was centralized at my school. There's a lot of these centralized areas at other schools, but at IAEA High School, when a student is first dropped off, or when they're getting picked up after a football game late at night, it's usually where the cafeteria is, the front of the school. So we actually, working with the Department of Education, we looked at potential light models that could replace the current lights there. And I realized that this plan was very feasible, that we could replace HID lights with LED lights. But what would this do for our school? How would it actually help our school? That comes down to 3 things: maintenance, efficiency, and security. When you look at those 3 factors, you realize that these lights could actually really help our students and our schools. So I want to start off with maintenance, one factor. The average life of an HID light bulb is around 20,000 to 25,000 hours. When you compare that to an LED light bulb, it's 100,000 hours. You see 4 to 5 times as long as a life. So you figure, instead of making the custodian replace the light bulb 4 or 5 times, they only need to replace the light bulb once. That saves a lot of light bulbs. Then it comes down to efficiency. When you look at any sort of light, you want to look at 2 things usually. I mean, I'm sure there's other things you want to look at, but the 2 major things I looked at was lumens and wattage. Wattage is the amount of energy that is required for that light to actually create the light, while lumens is the actual amount of light that comes out of that light. So typically you want as many lumens as you can get, and you don't want as much wattage because that's electricity. When you look at LED lights and you compare them to other lights, when you look at lumens, you see that they actually generate more lumens, they generate more light. But when you also look at wattage, you see that the wattage is actually higher. So you kind of get the best of both worlds with LED lights. And lastly, with security. Especially at night, after, like I said, a football game, you want, you kind of want lights that can protect the students. You want people to be able to reach for their car keys and safely reach their car. When you look at HID lights, you kind of think about an older car. When you first turn on the lights of that car at night, it's going to be a white color. But over time, it'll start to kind of create this orangey color. It'll get slowly darker. LED lights don't do that. If you look at these two models right here from the US Department of Energy, this is just one HID light over time compared to an LED light. They kind of did this entire experiment for a parking lot. If you look at that picture on the bottom right, you'll see that the parking lot on the left is using LED light bulbs, while the parking lot on the right is using HID light bulbs. You'll notice the one on the left is much brighter, and in addition to that, it's brighter over time. So overall, you actually see heightened security because of these light bulbs. Overall, that's really my presentation. Once again, thank you guys very much for giving me the opportunity to present my project. Thank you.
Thanks, Perry. I also want to add, Perry obviously is a proud graduate of IA High School right here, and Perry will actually be attending Harvard next year. So again, a product of your public school system here while we're here. Thanks. Thanks, Perry. I'd like to call Brandon Hayashi up here. He's going to, we still had more on that slideshow, sorry. Actually, can you go back to the Kahegri? It's been a few years now. A few years ago, we came to the realization that our utility rates, and again, anticipating utility rates increasing, that if we didn't do anything to try and make ourselves more sustainable, we would be paying utility rates just for electricity well over $100 million a year, which obviously is just not a sustainable effort. So in a very unique and I would say one of the only groupings, if you will, or projects like this in the nation, we went out for a very creative RFP that included a number of different things, and Brandon will cover some of the details there. But we've been at this now for about a year and a half, as far as actually in executing our sustainability program. And with that, I'll let Brandon cover some of the details and a little bit about the four pillars of what all's involved in CAHE, but really try and get into to some of the numbers as to the results we're seeing now.
Thank you and good afternoon. So the four pillars that Dan referred to are really could be down to renewable energy, energy efficiency, microgrids, and education. And the first three have a financial return on investment, but it is the fourth one which has the societal return, which has a sustainable funding that comes from the savings of the first three. So when we look at where we are today, with respect to the four components or four pillars of the program, you see those numbers there on the bottom. I'm just going to take them from top going down. And you'll also see across the islands we have those four pillars color-coded red, orange, blue, and a lighter blue for education. So to date, we've done just about 130 lighting audits, and we've touched essentially every major island across our archipelago. And with respect to the photovoltaic side of the house, we have 74 schools that are going to be receiving or have already received photovoltaic systems. But those 74 schools, some of them actually have two systems, so there's a total of 81.